this is Leslie from Silver Lining Knitting, and this is the first in a series of tutorials for a fingerless glove pattern with a Celtic motif. It's knit as a flat panel, and then you seam up the side, leaving a hole for the thumb. And since I'll be doing videos to demonstrate all the tricky parts, this would be a good pattern to try if you're comfortable with basic stitches and looking for something a little more interesting to move on to. The pattern is available on Ravelry and Etsy, and I'll post links in the comments where you can get it. You'll need a loom with at least 42 pegs. I'll be using my Kiss small gauge loom in the videos. The yarn I'm using is a Caron Simply Soft yarn, which is a number 4 worsted weight acrylic. I chose it because it's soft and easy to work with. You could use just about any worsted weight yarn for this project. I knit a test swatch of 20 stitches and 20 rows of garter stitch, and my gauge came out at 3.6 stitches per inch and 6.7 rows per inch. The finished glove is 14 inches long and 9 inches around the arm and 6.5 inches around the palm. So if your gauge is much different, you may need to adjust the pattern for size. If you need to change the width, you can add stitches or delete 2 stitches in the center of the chart at columns 20 and 21. You can also take out 1 stitch or add more than 1 at each end of the rows. You just need to have an even number of stitches in the row for the rib stitch pattern to come out right. And you can adjust the length by adding or deleting rows from those rib stitch sections at the top and bottom of the chart. Okay, here's how we will set up the loom. I'm using my Kiss small gauge loom, and I'm not using any spacers between the pegs and the pins. That will give me the gauge that I started with. I will need a total of 42 pegs. We're actually starting with a cast on of just 34 because we'll be adding in some stitches in a few rows. And I wanted to avoid doing a cable over the corner of the loom, so I have it set up in such a way that this is sort of the center of the chart, and I won't have to do any cables in there. They'll all be on the sides. I have marked my turning peg or end stitch, which is not on the chart, and then I have my stitch markers according to the chart. Notice the green stitch markers that are back over the pin. That's one of the nice things about these Kiss looms. Those stitches will not be happening yet. When I get to the point where I expand the row and do some increased stitches, those will move out onto the pegs. And so I have my loom all set up with my stitch markers, and we can get started with the cast on. Okay, I guess I'll just start with doing a slip knot. I've seen so many complicated ways of starting with a slip knot. It really is not that difficult. The easiest thing I find is I wrap the yarn around 2 fingers, and then I pull a loop through between those 2 fingers, and then pull the end to tighten. Then once you've got your knot tightened, you can use the slip knot to tighten it around your peg. And I try to make sure that I start that first loop a little bit tighter than I might want, because it will stretch out as I work. And I'm going to do an E-wrap cast on. So I'm wrapping each peg this way. Notice that I have left, there are extra pegs on the ends of my rows. I'm going to need 4 extra pegs on each side for the increases that I'll do as we work through the pattern. So I've left those. I've left space to increase my row size.
And I'll show you how I do the end stitches. So I've done my E-wrap all the way around to and including my edge stitch. What I do with my Kiss Loom is I wrap around the pin behind and then come out front and do a U-wrap for that first stitch, because that's the edge stitch that will always get a U-wrap. And I knit it off, and then after I've knit it off, I'll go back and take it off the pin from behind, and that gives me a chance to sort of adjust the tension on that stitch. Now I'll go back through and E-wrap all the rest for my cast on row, and all of this happens before you get to the chart. So we do this cast on row, which is not pictured in the chart. And since this part's fairly easy, I will finish it off camera and come back with the next step. Okay, I'll show you the last few stitches of my cast on row so you can see how I kind of get started with good tension in my stitches. It makes these first couple of rows that you knit a little bit tedious, but I think it works well in terms of getting you started right with getting good tension on your stitches. So I'm going to wrap these last few stitches with the E-wrap. I'm not going to do the edge stitch or turning peg just yet, but I've done the E-wrap, and then I will knit the old stitches off. And then what I do in my first couple of rows, well, you always have to do this. I'm going to loosen the stitches because I had that new wrap pretty tight so it wouldn't come off while I was knitting the old stitch off. Now I need to give myself a little slack, so I pull a little bit of slack on all of those stitches. And then at the beginning, because there's really nothing to hold on to in the back, what I do is take my knitting tool and kind of get behind each stitch and pull the old one back a little bit so that I've got a little bit of space, that these stitches aren't too tight. Okay, and then my final stitch, the edge stitch at the end of the row, always gets a U-wrap. I do that even on my cast on row, just so I have a nice consistent stitch at the edge for when I want to do a seam later. So there's our cast on row. The next step will be to knit the beginning rib stitch section of the chart, which I believe goes up to about row 7. Yes, so you'll knit the first 7 rows of the chart now, and then you can look at the next video.